Here we are, we're at InfoSec Europe, 30 years of InfoSecurity in London, different venues over the years, a lot of growth over the years. I don't know how much maturity over the years. I think maybe I don't know if it's a roller coaster or a cycle of maturity in terms of, and technology changes, business changes, the threat landscape changes, knowledge of all of that and the teams change, and we're gonna talk some about that and how teams actually work together, or perhaps not most effectively together. Rob, it's good to have you on again.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you again here.
Good to be back.
Rob Black.
I've got a friend with me as well this time.
I know.
An InfoSec celebrity, I think.
Please do the honor of introducing our special guest.
Ladies and gents, I'm delighted that Purvi Kay from BAE Systems is joining us, and perhaps Purvi, you'd like to give us a little bit of overview of your various different initiatives that you're running and contributing to here and more broadly as well, if that's right.
Sure. Firstly, thank you for this. So I'm Purvi Kay. I'm the head of cybersecurity for the Future Combat Aircraft System in BAE Systems. Also, on top of that, I chair the Women in Cyber program for BAE Systems, and I'm also neurodiversity champion. And all of that comes into play when we come to events like this. So I do like to promote all the work we do there.
It's super important. Super important. And also, I don't know if it's also recognized here in the UK, but it's a special month in the States anyway. Pride Month, I think. Yes. So obviously, lots to consider there in terms of who we need to help join the forces, right?
To create that competitive advantage and the cutting edge in the fight that we're having, I think. To
Yes,
is
absolutely.
really critical.
Yep.
So.
All hands on deck. Rob, just a quick word about yourself too. Obviously, you did a session.
I forgot.
You did a session earlier, but they may not have gotten that one. They came to this one first for obvious reasons. We have celebrity.
So Rob Black, I run the UK Cyber Leaders Challenge, which is a competition aimed at bringing university students into cyber, identifying and nurturing the next generation of cybersecurity leadership talent, but very much focusing on the soft skills, leadership skills, critical thinking skills, and so on, and really getting them, individuals who might not be thinking about cyber, to recognise that there's a role that they can play, communicating, working with technical teams, communicating to the board, more seniors, communicating risk, communicating uncertainty, and really sort of engendering all that multidisciplinary approach that is so critical in the cyber conversations we're having. And I think that's what I would say we're seeing now, is that the evolution of the CISO role, the evolution of thinking in cyber to be much broader than just the technical aspects and the ones and zeros. And I hasten to add, and I don't know for sure, but Purvi's role is probably less technically focused and much more focused about bringing communities of people together to make the job work, and that's what I think is really interesting.
Well, let's dig into that, because I think there's the entry into the space, and I think traditionally it's been organic, right? There may be some training and certifications, but it's typically somebody starts in IT or somebody has some technical background, or perhaps some focused way of thinking about a problem that brings them in. But cyber is a broad business function ultimately, right? Where there are different teams within cybersecurity that have to work together, different teams that have to work with other departments. And so I guess maybe a big picture of that from you, what do you see? Do we still see silos of heavy IT folks focusing on IT and tech that have a hard time communicating with the others outside the business, or what are you seeing there?
I think although we've come a long way, there's still this perception that cyber is an IT problem, and even at board level they can say that, well, that's an IT thing, go and fix it. But what we're seeing now, and I like what you said, it's a business, it's a whole business, we need all sorts of skill set. The way cyber threats themselves are evolving, the way the attack vectors are changing, the sophistication and the skill set that have been used there, we need to mirror that. So we do need that diversity in skill set to be able to protect ourselves against those threats. And what we are seeing is that those skill sets are not just the technical skill sets now. We do need teams who are able to communicate those technical aspects better to our boards. They can make informed decisions. We need people who can understand human behaviors. We just talked about that earlier. trying to get into the attacker's mindset, how they're behaving, why they're behaving the way they're doing, so we can be one step ahead of them. So we need people who've got that skill set. We need people who are able to manage different stakeholders in a different complex environment. The area I work in is a trilateral program. We work with different nations. All nations have different standards they want to follow. They have different working cultures. They have a different language. We need people who can bring all that together and collaborate. So we need those collaborative skill sets as well.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that that's not an easy challenge. And I think quite often the technical community can think that that bit isn't as interesting or as critical, or can be done quickly. But I think cultural change between teams and organisations takes time, and improving ways of working takes time. And I think that's really what we're having to recognise to build your effective teams. To have that competitive advantage really doesn't just happen at a click of a finger. And,
Right.
you know,
Well, the reality is we're human, right? And we tend to put ourselves amongst others that we're comfortable with because we share similar values or interests or whatever. And therefore we kind of naturally draw lines around our own communities and separating us from others, which moves then to not just a societal or cultural thing, but also a communication and a language thing, right? So IT may speak well with security, but you bring that to legal or to HR, and things start to break down. Those little circles that we run in isolate us.
Yep.
They put us in silos. So I don't know how. Maybe some of the work you're doing.
I
in
can
the,
think
in
of a good
training,
example.
yeah.
It's not some work I've done, but as a piece of work I really liked. A colleague of mine, Professor Debbie Ashton, spent some time sitting down with auditors and software development teams. And they don't often talk to each other very much. And she actually used some really clever techniques. She used marriage guidance counselling techniques, and she pretty much sat down with them and said, right, what's really annoying you about them, and what's really annoying you about them? And they spent their time on a sofa having therapy so they could end up working together, understanding each other's perspective, why they were coming in with this perspective, why they were having these issues, why they were ignoring that. And when they started understanding each other, they started working all together, and they got that kind of joint progress. And I think a simple but a very effective way of just looking at how you can get teams to work together, you have to do that by enabling their understanding.
Right.
You know, I hate the phrase, the humans are the weakest link. No, if we're designing systems that don't appreciate that humans might not necessarily think about things in a different way, or might respond in a time of, in time of stress, might respond inaccurately, then we're not designing things thinking about how humans act. And we need to understand human heuristics. We need to understand how, if I come from one perspective, I might not see the world in the same way as someone who comes from another perspective. And we bring that together. We get that diversity of thought, we bring different mental models to the problem, and then we can help really kind of take forward thinking rather than get stuck in the stovepipe of negative groupthink, which has been an age-old problem. If you think about some of the government inquiries, too much groupthink is never a good thing. We really need to do that, challenging each other, to teach each other to think about how we can really address these problems properly.
I think that point you've made about we need to understand the other perspective and the way they're thinking, I think that's a crucial point here. In security is often seen as a hindrance, a barrier. When we're trying to design something within our organization and we're trying to make sure that it's designed and implemented securely, we're always seen as an afterthought, right? Or it has been that way. Let's do it and then we'll involve security after. And by then it's too late. We're trying to implement secure by design right now, so making sure that people are thinking about security from the forefront. We will not be able to do that if we not have buy-in from our design teams and our product teams, if we don't help them understand why it's important to think about security, what is the impact of not thinking about security. So almost like the marriage counselling of, this is my view, what's your view, how can we come to a mutual compromise of how we're going to work together. We're doing that constantly with our product teams, our design teams, making sure that they're doing whatever they're doing with security in mind.
So, something to add?
Yeah, I was just, a piece of work was nothing to do with cyber, but I think equally relevant. We used to do some training for the part of the MOD called the Cultural Specialist Unit, and we gave them we called it the Cultural Specialist course, and that was to give them tools to go out and understand the atmospherics on the ground in Afghanistan or Iraq, because military are very much trained in military thinking, follow process A to B to C to D, but they needed to understand the situation and the context they were finding themselves, which they had to go and get that information by talking to people who didn't look like them, didn't act like them, didn't have the same set of values as them. And that was a very uncomfortable position for the military to be in. So we had to give them that training to make them feel comfortable, give them some skills and some tools to do that, so they could have better conversations and realise just because that person didn't see the world in the same way as them, it didn't mean it was wrong, it was just different. And actually their worldview was equally as legitimate, it was just from a different perspective, their appreciation of time, their appreciation of power in the community. Very different to the UK structure, for example, but absolutely effective in the communities they're operating in. But we needed to understand that. We needed to empower these individuals to have better skills at understanding empathy and appreciation, not necessarily agreeing with, but being able to understand and therefore act accordingly around it. And that, again, completely non-cyber example, but some really powerful examples.
No, I'm so glad you went there, because I'm hoping you have an example or two maybe you can share, because everything to me looks like a project, and what you just described is kind of like a project. There's an outcome, we're here, a bunch of things and people do things together, hopefully, to achieve that outcome. And it's having that common understanding of where we want to go, what we might encounter along the way, each person's roles and responsibilities, dependencies and all that, so that we can have a conversation, right, to move us through that project. And I'm wondering if you have the best example I have, because I'm deep in engineering, is like engineers and delivery and site reliability with security built in. DevSecOps has been a thing that has a lot of emphasis on it. I don't know if that's a program that you are part of or can share about, or any other examples that you can describe.
I mean, a lot of the things we're doing within, it's not just also having just a cyber team there, but there are things we might be trying to implement within the organization, bringing something new into the organization, for example, where, we're going to be working with customers like the government. So for that, which becomes a project, and for that project, we're going to have to involve the legal team, the commercial team, the procurement team. So we have run many projects like that where, we've missed a couple of those stakeholders, and that's been detrimental in the sense that the projects haven't taken off or slow. But we're educating everybody, and we're educating ourselves on why that's important to have security, procurement, commercial, all of them lined up. And a lot of our projects now have all of that in place, and that sort of stakeholder group is a set group, and people understand. They understand cyber. We understand not the ins and outs, but we understand why legal need to be there, HR need to be there. So there's a lot of projects like that we'd run in that way. I can't possibly name a single one, but a lot of them need those groups of people as well to collaborate with. I think in the context of AVCAS, we're working with 3 different governments. We're working with 3 different industries. They're all coming together to create a joint venture. So it's not only the groups we're working with, but the transition period we're working alongside as well. So we're working in a time of uncertainty. We're working with multiple types of different groups of government and industry, with the supply chain as well. We just have to keep all of that into mind. But ultimately what underpins that is that one mission. So everybody having that understanding of what the goal is, what's the goalpost, and how we get there together.
It's quite funny, reflecting, I can see some of my previous colleagues laughing at this example I'm going to bring in. One of the exercises I normally do with my teams if I'm working with a new team or working across different teams is that early on we do lots of team building, and not the usual kind of go off and have an adventure team building, but I think that's important, that it shows...
Tequila too, basically.
Well, exactly. One of the exercises we do is we do the river exercise, which is a big rich picture exercise where we draw the journey the team is going to go on and the goal we're going towards as if it's a river, and we use the rich pictures. So the technique is very much use as few words as possible to draw and illustrate the challenges, the barriers, the hurdles, the wins, the journey, the routes, the meandering you might do, and where you're focusing on. And it's always awkward at first, I'm not going to lie, because everyone's like, I don't want to do drawing because I'm a professional, I'm not in kindergarten. But by the end of the session, people are colouring and scribbling. But the less words you use on the page, the more they have to articulate to each other what they're seeing, how they're seeing. And that actually brings people together, because you get that shared sense making, that shared understanding, and that shared trajectory towards what you're trying to achieve. So again, it feels very soft and fluffy. I mean, this feels like a long way from technical cyber with ones and zeros, doesn't it? But it's absolutely critical.
I think it is the word collaboration, because of course you need to collaborate. It's very undervalued. in a space like this, when you're trying to build the next generation fighter jet, for example.
Right.
Collaboration is key, but we really need to understand what does collaboration mean in an environment, in the ecosystem that we're operating in. And we need to make sure everybody's on the same page with understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a fantastic conversation. I think talk for hours on this, many different angles. I think for those listening and watching, I think my takeaway would be, don't be afraid to embrace the non-tech aspects of this, and to have a conversation that may feel awkward or draw pictures that may not seem natural or normal for what you think your job is.
Yeah.
But having those moments of connection at the human level and understanding each other at the human level clearly is going to be the way forward to
Absolutely.
And I think
to
that's
success.
the power of events like conference, whether you be a vendor, whether you be a managed service provider, whether you be a client, whether you be a CISO, it's an opportunity to go and say hello to someone, have a coffee,
Exactly.
have a chat, and actually just get an understanding of their perspective. And that's, I guess, for a sales perspective, is a good way to do the sales. But actually, it works in everything. I can understand you a little bit better. We can take that time. We can move forward together. And I think that's collaboration at its heart, isn't it?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. And this is fantastic. Thank you both for
Thank
joining me here at InfoSecurity Europe in London.
did I pass the test? Have I got an opportunity
We'll
to
have
take
to ask
Marco's seat a little
Marco
bit more?
from my perspective, he can take Marco's seat forever.
All right, okay, sorted.
And we'll see if he agrees with that. But no, you've been fantastic, Rob. It's
Thank you so much.
Great to
Thank
meet
you.
you and to chat with you. And thanks everybody for listening, watching. Do stay tuned. itspmagazine.com/infosec25 for all of our coverage. Loads coming to you over these few days, and hopefully you join the conversation as well. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.